Hello, my name is Frank O'Brien. I am a senior benefits educator with WestPath Benefits and Investments. It is my pleasure to share the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan for the Villages School of Naples. So today's webinar is you, UMPIP, and your future. We in the benefit education world love our acronyms, so UMPIP or UMPIP is often how we will refer to the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan. First, a few things about WestPath. WestPath, we are a not-for-profit organization. So that means that the assets that we have under management, the earnings that kicks off and all, no stakeholder or shareholder is getting any of that. All of that activity stays within the investment funds where it belongs. We have approximately $26 billion in assets under management. We are the largest faith-based reporting pension fund in the world. That $26 billion gives us a great economy of scale. As you hear about our programs and our plan features, you'll hear that there is no additional cost to you. We have over 100,000 participants in the plan. That includes myself, yourself, clergy and lay employees of the United Methodist Church and other organizations that are Methodist in their polity. And what we are about at WestPath is caring for those who serve by providing investment and benefit services that honor the mission and principles of the United Methodist Church. Well, what is UMPIP? We're going to go through the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan. You'll hear about the contribution types that are available to you, the WestPath funds that are available to you for your investments of your retirement assets. We'll talk about life happens where loans and distributions and eventually retirement income can be generated. We'll talk about resources. With the UMPIP, it is a defined contribution qualified retirement plan. It's a 403B plan. In the media parlance, people talk about their 401ks. Well, in the not-for-profit world, it is a 403B plan. It's an account balance plan. You're making your personal contributions into the plan. The village school is making contributions into the plan. It's accumulating over time. You can see the market value of that account balance on a daily basis. And again, you'll have your participant and employer contributions going into UMPIP. And you'll have options and choice. What contribution type do you want to take advantage of? And you can change that over time or do a blend. How do you want to take advantage of the investment funds that are provided to you? You'll have two options. You'll hear about self-managing your investments or a program we call life stage investment management. But options and choice you will see throughout this presentation. There are several advantages of participation. One is you can save on taxes. You can save on taxes now, or you can save on taxes later. The before tax contribution account we will review is just that. The contribution goes into the plan before it is taxed. Earnings have not yet to be taxed. All of that will come out as ordinary income. But as I review the Roth contribution account with you, you'll hear that if it's a qualified Roth contribution account in retirement, those distributions can come out to you tax-free. We have Autopilot Solutions, our Life Stage Solution Suite. We have Life Stage Investment Management. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to go into detail on it, but I will reference it a few times prior to that. Again, you're asking us to tailor your investment allocation for you. And we have a program, Life Stage Retirement Income, where you're asking us to derive the amount of monthly installment payments that can be derived from your account balances through your retirement. You'll hear about how the employer contribution is provided in the plan. We have sustainable investments. We will go through the investment funds at some point, but here we're pointing out that we do promote environmental stewardship, human rights, sound corporate governance, and how we structure our investment funds. We have some screening where certain industries, pornography, alcohol, tobacco, we will not participate in those types of industries in our investment funds. And then lastly, EY Financial Planning Services. They provide comprehensive financial planning services to all of us participants. EY, Ernst & Young, you may be familiar with them. We partner with them to provide this financial servicing option for you, and I'll go into detail at that towards the tail end of this, but I will be mentioning them throughout. There's no out-of-pocket cost to any of us to take advantage of EY because the operating expenses or fees from our investment funds actually pays the overhead. Included in that is EY as well as our autopilot solutions. To receive the employer contribution at the village school, there is an eligibility requirement or criteria. First is you have to have a minimum age requirement of 18. You have to be 18. Complete 2 months of service to begin to receive the employer contribution. Work at least 1,040 hours per year, so in essence, a full-time employee. And then monthly eligibility or monthly enrollment in the plan for employer contributions once these requirements are met. Again, these requirements, although not lengthy, do apply to the employer contributions. The way this works is 3% of your compensation, participant compensation, your compensation is automatically put into the plan. This is a non-matching contribution. We highly encourage all of you to participate in the plan to the extent that you can. If you can only get started at 1%, get started at 1%, 2, 3, or 4. But even just with that, this non-matching contribution, if you're participating in the plan or not, if you meet the eligibility criteria, you will get that 3% contribution in your account, and that happens per payroll period. With employer contributions and participant contributions, there's this notion of vesting or ownership. How much of the retirement account do you own? Well, we're going to go into the personal contribution accounts next, but they're always 100% vested because they are your account. And then the employer contributions, that 3% contribution that we refer to, after 18 months of service, it becomes 100% vested to you. It's called a cliff vesting. So it goes from 0, then it falls off the cliff, goes to 100% after you have attained 18 months of service with the village school. With the participant contribution accounts, at first, this is eligible to you upon hire. So you do not have to wait for that 2-month time period to transpire to start to contribute personally into the plan. You can do that upon your hire, as long as the other full-time status and age requirements are met. Then you decide how much you want to contribute into the plan, how you want to contribute into the plan, what type of account you want to contribute into, and how would you like that to be invested in our funds. With the how to contribute or how much to contribute, you can do it on a percentage or dollar basis. We accept both, no problem. However, we do recommend percentage basis because even if you're thinking you can't afford to put more money into the plan, if you do get a wage increase, you'll know some money, more additional money will go in just through the proportionate way the percentage will work against your compensation. Then we'll talk about the contribution types momentarily, how to contribute to the plan. And then you have the WestPath funds available to you. You can self-manage. You can do your own investment allocation in our funds if you're comfortable with the investment markets and asset classes and such. Or you can use Life Stage Investment Management, where again, we're taking over that role of allocating that money in the funds for you. And later on, I'll explain how that program works in more detail. As far as contributing into the plan, the two most common types are the before tax and the Roth contribution account. I'll go through each of those. I'll also touch on an after-tax contribution account, more the classic after-tax contribution account, and also talk about rollovers because the UMPIP can accept rollovers from other qualified retirement plans and arrangements. So we have the before tax contribution account. Here the word's kind of helping us know what's going on. You get your gross pay, let's say your monthly gross pay, for example. Now, lay employees, our Social Security taxes get applied, but then the remaining amount, the calculated amount of the contribution comes and gets deducted from your pay, goes into the UMPIP, and that remaining amount is what gets taxed. It's taxed at the federal level. In Florida, not at the state level, but in other states, there is state taxes, so that would apply in that environment. The contribution goes in tax deferred. The earnings are tax deferred, but when it comes out as distributions or in retirement, it is ordinary income. So it's ordinary income taxes that you will have to pay. With the Roth contribution account, this is actually an after-tax contribution. However, the way it works is you get your monthly amount. Again, for lay employees, that FICA is taken, and then that net amount after that. We'll calculate the amount that's going to go into the Roth contribution account in UMPIP, but we don't deduct it from that amount. We keep the overall amount after the FICA taxes as it is, then apply the federal taxes, again, if appropriate, state taxes, and then that calculated amount is put into the UMPIP. So what's really happening here is, because we're holding on to that net amount after the FICA, we're prepaying the taxes on that already into the Treasury, because of the way the taxes are working through. And if this Roth account becomes a qualified Roth account, then distributions later on will come out tax-free. The contributions have already been taxed and cannot be taxed again, but because you front-loaded the taxes into the Treasury, the earnings on that will also come out tax-free. To qualify the Roth account, it's very simple. First, it is a retirement plan. So you have to be over age 59 and a half. It's a magic age in the retirement world. You have to be over age 59 and a half. And then the very first contribution has to age up 5 years. So that first contribution has to be 5 years old or older. It's not every contribution or every year's contribution. It's just that initial contribution. If it's 5 years old or older and you yourself are 59 and a half or older, you can get distributions from that account tax-free. Now, also, if the participant passes away or if there's a permanent or long-term disability condition that comes into play, then the account becomes available as well. Here, please speak to our customer solutions area to work through any of the details that may apply to you or the passage of a loved one. The UMPIP will accept rollover contributions. Rollovers are other qualified retirement arrangements, either within the context of an employer-provided qualified plan, like a 401k, 403b, governmental 457, or even a traditional IRA. Not a Roth IRA, but a traditional IRA. There's two ways in which you can roll the money into the plan. The second one there, indirect rollover, if you're going to avoid that, we would recommend you avoid that because that's all working through you. If that comes to you, the prior employer is required to withhold 20%, then you're trying to get that amount back to what it was originally and then roll it over to us. You have to use your own assets for that, and then that flushes through on your taxes. Very cumbersome. Here, do the direct rollover that you see on top. We have an incoming rollover form. A colleague of mine in Benefits Education also manages the rollover in process. She will contact the current holder of that retirement asset and work to get that rolled over into the UMPIP, all seamlessly happening behind the scenes. You don't see it, you don't touch it. It is a non-taxable transaction. You will get a tax form, but it's going to indicate it's non-taxable, so you don't have to worry about paying any taxes on that. And now you have it all together with your other retirement assets that you're accumulating in the UMPIP. As I said, the UMPIP is a defined contribution account. The IRS, through law and regulation, defines for us on an annual basis how much we can contribute into the plan. For 2024, the limits are, if you are under age 50, it's $23,000. And that's the before tax, the Roth, or combining the two. People are using both at the same time. It's still that one limit. If you're 50 or older, there's a $7,500 catch-up contribution, which gets us to $30,500. And then the limit also has the consideration of the employer contribution. So in total in this year, 24, you cannot have more than $69,000 put into the plan. Now, we readily admit that these are robust numbers. However, if you have the opportunity in your household to not only achieve that level of contributions, but you may even have some space left over after that, we have more of the pure after-tax contribution account. That additional amount you would put into the after-tax contribution account. It is purely after tax. So after everything has come through and flowed through that payroll cycle, then we will go and calculate the amount, put it in the plan. The contribution itself cannot be taxed again. It's already been taxed. But here, the earnings on that account will be taxed as ordinary income in retirement. Couple of concepts to think about here in the retirement world. The first one is dollar cost averaging. This is a long time investment play, if you will. On a regular basis, a monthly basis or so, you're putting contributions into the plan. They're going into our funds and they're buying the underlying shares or units of those WestPath funds. With dollar cost averaging, for example, here we have $500 is going in on a monthly basis. Well, the markets change on a regular basis. So if the markets are up and doing well, that means the prices is high. So that $500 would buy maybe less shares, like in our example here, April at 16. But markets also go down. So now markets go down, that same dollar amount is coming in, but you're buying more shares, like in August, where now you're buying 28 shares in a particular fund. And because you're accumulating the units or the shares underneath the fund in that regard, you get a higher internal rate of return from that investment, as opposed to saying you got an inheritance and took a big lump sum of money and put it into a similar fund. It would grow over time, but not to the extent to which an environment where dollar cost averaging is applied. And this is statistically valid because of the way in which the underlying securities are being purchased over the long haul. So this is a real benefit of getting started, contributing, continuing to increase your contributions into the plan, but you can see the benefit of doing so on a regular basis. And then there's also the time value of money, compounding, if you will. The accounts grow over time. This is just a simple model. We have an individual or two individuals, one's age 25, getting started at age 25 with $35,000 compensation. We have an assumed compensation growth of 3%. Annual investment growth, conservative, 7%. Then our second individual is age 45, starting at $65,000 in comp. Well, that individual gets started. They put in that 1% right away. They leave it like that. And you can see over time, it continues to grow and accumulate. And going into retirement at age 65, well, that 1% is translated to $102,000. But in an instance where, and we hope this would apply, you could do more like 4%. Well, you can see that that spread really starts to take off, and you have much more robust market value account in retirement to draw income from. I mean, it's not a coincidence. It's about 4 times as much as that 1%. But you can see, just looking at that $409,000 number, that is impactful heading into retirement. But also in our model, we understand that people get into employment, they're not necessarily ready to make contributions. Kids, college, buy a house, just those types of things. So now they're getting started in a robust way at age 45, putting in 6%, same growth assumption for compensation and the investments. And now that person over their time horizon has been able to accumulate $201,000. Again, in our example here. So you can see here, and it's really one of the underlying things, it's never too late to get started to contribute into the plan. The sooner, the better, and the more you're able to, the better. But don't take any negativity away from it. What you can do, when you can do it, it's all going to work out over the long haul just by the nature of that compounding effect or time value of money. So you're contributing into the plan on a regular basis. You determine what contribution type you want to use. Maybe you've rolled over some money as well. And now you're investing your plan in the UMPIP. Well, there are several benefits of investing with WestPath. The first is, as I mentioned already, we practice sustainable investing. But sustainable investing really in this context means 2 things. One is sustainability over time. We've been around for 115, 118 years, have been paying retirement benefits, are doing so today, and have every intention of doing so as far as the eye can see. But it also means that environmental, social governance, screening principles that we apply in how we structure our investment funds. So we're doing it in such a way where we want it to hold up over time, but we also want to make sure that they're upholding the values of the church. We have a diversified set of investment options. I'll review with you. I'll go through each of the funds fairly quickly, but you'll see that they are diversified. Everything from very conservative, capital preservation, no real growth, but that's intentional, to midstream risky funds to more higher risky funds like an international equity fund, which is our riskiest fund. We have competitive returns relative to benchmark. So we do benchmark ourselves. We may not actually have competitors in the marketplace, but we always make sure that the investment funds that we structure, working with our asset managers, they are performing as the market is performing. So we're benchmarking against that. So like funds, peer funds, we are looking at comparing ourselves to. Because we are a not-for-profit, we are a large organization with a lot of assets under management, we're able to have low expense ratios, moderate amount of operating fees that come off our investment funds. Again, we're not paying out stakeholders or shareholders, and we're not giving any commissions to anybody on staff at Westpath. Even if they bring in a new local school in the annual conference, that doesn't mean that that individual who made that relationship connection is going to get any sort of commission. So again, the money stays where it belongs, in the funds for all of our benefit. And again, we will talk about life stage investment management shortly. The listing of the investment funds and those blue buttons there, it's the asset class type of a fund, and then the funds that we have. So the first one, capital preservation fund, we have our stable value fund. It is a low earning fund intentionally because it is intended to have very, very little risk, because we want to preserve the capital, the dollars that went in there. You won't see this while you're really in your accumulation age in retirement. You can if you self-manage, elected, but as people getting to and into and through retirement, this fund really comes into play more, because as much as we need a little risk to keep the account growing over time, we need to make sure we have the monies in the account to pay the retirement income. Our fixed income funds are bond funds, debt instruments put out there by our treasury or our foreign treasuries, sovereign bonds, corporate bonds, both U.S. domestic and international, other types of what they call cash derivatives, all going into these funds. And these funds grow over time, they take on risk, but they're also on a regular basis providing income back into the fund by virtue of the debt obligation that's being repaid. We have three. The Inflation Protection Fund. This one really does match up with treasuries that are sold, and it's intended to keep pace with inflation in the domestic U.S. economy. We're trying to get a little bit more, but not necessarily trying to do that much, because we really want to make sure we're trending with purchasing power over time. Our fixed income fund is a large array of these various securities I already spoke to you about. U.S. treasuries, foreign treasuries, corporate, US-based, international corporate bonds, all those types of things. Within that, you're adding more risk, so there's more potential rate of return. And then that third fund, this extended term fixed income fund, well, when you think about the bond market in the media, we hear about the 10-year bond and the 30-year bond, and all that relates to mortgages and all. Well, that's the area of the bond market that this fund invests in. There's a higher rate of risk there. They call it a premium risk, because nobody knows what the economy is going to look out that far in advance. We don't know what it's going to look like kind of tomorrow. But so that far in advance, you know, they're doing their due diligence to make sure that it's coming into our funds appropriately, but there's a higher rate of risk with a higher rate of potential return. Here, the two categories are the balanced fund and the equity funds. We'll talk about the equity funds. This is the U.S. equity fund, U.S. equity index fund. This is a new fund to us, and the international equity fund. These are company stock funds, right? Stock market, publicly traded companies. Again, the words are telling us what's happening. Within the U.S. equity fund, they are U.S.-based companies. But they're the broad swath of U.S.-based companies. We have the large growth funds and companies, that we hear about in the media all the time. There's mid-size companies and small-size companies. We get involved in those as well and get a good array of those companies there. There's a higher rate of risk there, higher rate of potential return. The U.S. Equity Index Fund is an array of these different funds. It's more broad in that the benchmark that we're looking at, that index, is what's known as the Russell 3000. So we're doing our screening to weed out what we don't want to put in there, but it's a broader array of a representation of public companies within the U.S. economy. Additional risk, additional potential rate of return. And then the international equity fund are foreign companies, Siemens and Sony, those types of companies that come into the international equity fund. Again, large companies, mid-size, small, from areas around the world, countries from around the world that build that fund. It's a lot of added risk to that. There's currency risk, the euro, the yen, those types of things, as well as some other political and geopolitical issues that may come into play. So it's the highest risk fund that we have, but it also has the highest rate of potential return over the long haul. Then up on top is that balanced fund. We have a multiple asset fund. So it's a baked-in diversification of the funds that we just talked about. We use our funds as a fund-of-fund dynamic. We're not rebuilding this thing. We're using the funds that we already have in place. So that U.S. equity and international equity fund, that gets to 65% equity, and then the 35% for the fixed income side is a blend of the fixed income and inflation protection fund. This is more or less a static allocation within the fund. We're always trying to stay in that 65 to 35% range in our multiple asset fund. We also have the social values choice suite of funds, and these offer participants with a heightened focus on that ESG type of investing environment. We're focused on companies' environmental and social performance. We're looking at climate change and other issues here. These funds are available to you if you self-manage. If you're in life stage investment management, these funds are not available to you. And certainly do your research if you're interested in investing in these funds. EY Financial Planning Services would be a critical conversation to have around these funds. And again, we've talked about risk and potential rate of return, right? Nothing's guaranteed. History tells us that these funds perform this way, the markets perform this way, but it's not guaranteed. So we have potential rate of return. You can see here again, stable value fund. It's intended to be a capital preservation fund. Low risk, low potential rate of return. In the middle there, you see the extended term fixed income fund, the fixed income fund. I mean, they're still in the income fund environment. They're in the bond fund world, but still there's some added risk with potential rate of return. Going all the way up through the equities to the international equity fund. It's the highest risk with the highest potential rate of return that we have. This dynamic right here is based on historical performance of these types of investment funds, asset classes, those types of things. But as we know, the pandemic, inflation got hot in a hurry, that these things can turn over and go flippy-floppy on you every once in a while. But history tells us they will reset over the long haul to get this potential rate of return relative to the risk that you're taking. But again, retirement plan for the long haul. You can, when investing in the WestPath funds, you can self-manage. You can choose your own mix of investment funds, as you see there on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we're going to talk about life stage investment management next. But either way, either choice that you make, how you want to invest your contributions in the WestPath funds, we say have that conversation with EY Financial Planning Services. They know our funds. They understand our goals in the funds. The mix, they know life stage investment management. So you can talk and work with them. Just get an extra layer of information, extra layer of comfort as you're making your decisions as to how you want to invest in these funds. With life stage investment management, this mysterious program I've mentioned a few times, what this is a personalized investment management tool for your defined contribution accounts. So what we're doing is we're looking at you as an individual, your timeline, your horizon, your runway to go to retirement. We're looking at your age. We're looking at what we think your expected commencement date may be. So we may use your full retirement age of age 67. Lay employees are definitely assuming Social Security benefits. Some clergy have opted out. We would need to know that. And then this notion called risk tolerance. How much risk are you willing to take in the markets? Are you a conservative investor, a moderate investor, or an aggressive investor? Again, all that dynamic gets built into life stage investment management. And then for you, we tailor an investment allocation. And I'll go through an example momentarily. But we'll set up an investment allocation for your funds, and we will put that on autopilot. Basically, there are two things happening here with this diversified investment portfolio, two different time frames to be mindful of. One is the long haul. It's like a glide path of how we set up the allocation over time. So I'm going to use an example of someone who is 45 years old. We're in life stage investment management. We set them up with an investment allocation of 70% of their account is in our equity funds and 30% of that account is in the fixed income funds. It's 70-30 at about age, let's say 45 or 50. As this individual ages up, slowly and subtly, we bring down the amount of the equity exposure, the amount of the stock funds that they have, and slowly and subtly increase the amount of fixed income investments that we have. So that over time, that 70-30, maybe 55 will look more like 60-40 at age 60, more like 55-45, because we're doing a glide path. We need to maintain risk with the equities for continuing growth. But as we get into and through retirement, we need more fixed income to make sure we have the ability to make the payments to you in retirement. So that's happening over the long haul. But we also look at your allocation, at your account 4 times a year based on your birthday. So quarterly off of your birthday, we're looking and saying, hey, we want you in a 70-30 type of allocation. Markets are doing great. You went to 80-20. Well, that sounds good, but that's not where we want you now. So we'll actually bring you back down to 70, get that 20% back up to 30. Or the bond market's doing great, the stocks aren't doing great, you went to 60-40. Well, I mean, you may be getting earnings off of that, but that's not where we want you. We want you at 70-30. So we're going to sell back down to get you under 30% on the fixed income side to get you back to the 70% on the equity side. And because we do that, we actively manage the allocation during the course of the year, I'm permitted to say that there is a marginally higher internal rate of return, similar to dollar cost averaging, that you're getting by virtue of the fact that we are actively managing the allocation throughout the course of the year while we're doing that longer haul glide path over time. And those two things working in tandem really set up for a very, very strong investment portfolio program. You can engage in this yourself. You can tell us what your risk tolerance is. You can go on our benefits access web portal. I'll show momentarily, and you can make changes there. Just any changes you make, we'll wait until the quarterly review before they are applied. Now, many of our participants, I mean, a lot of our participants, they begin to contribute into the plan. They see it's going into the investment funds. They really didn't make or direct us as to how they want the investments to be going in. We default them into life stage investment management. We'll look at all those demographic parameters that we talked about, and we will assume a moderate risk tolerance. So for someone who may not really understand what's going on with their investments, with their contributions, life stage investment management, moderate risk tolerance. Again, you can see that information on your record on benefit access, but it's well tended to. It's a good program. And again, it's always worthwhile doing the research to get a greater understanding of that program. On westpath.org, we have a ton of information for you. Our funds, I mean, they're private funds for Westpath, but they operate like mutual funds. So we do price them daily. There's a daily market value you can see. We have fund descriptions, high level fund descriptions, or you can go in-depth fund descriptions if you want to do that. We will show you the comparative results and our benchmarks. You'll see our operating expenses or fees. All of that information is available to you on westpath.org. So you're contributing into the plan. It's getting invested in the investment funds, doing what it should do over time. And something may happen, a life happens situation, certainly prior to retirement, that's a great life happens situation, but you're trying to think about maybe I have to access my retirement account for whatever reason while I'm still in service. And we do have that. I mean, there's different times that you may need to access your account. We'll always say, remember, if you take that distribution out, you may be reducing or having a negative impact on your financial security later. But again, life happens. We just say, speak to your financial planner, tax advisor, EY Financial Planning, call our customer solutions area just to work through your situation and what may be, the better way to access your account. In accessing your account, this goes to, while you're still in service, this goes to your personal contribution account, right? So the pre-tax or the rollover, if you're using after tax, that type of thing. Before we get into distributions, I'm going to review with you hardship loans. So let's say you need to get $10,000 to fix the roof because of a storm or something. Well, you may not necessarily have to take a distribution, you may be able to take a loan. I'll go through that. You're paying it back to yourself with interest. So that'll go back into your account to be used later on. We also have hardship withdrawals under certain circumstances. If you're under age 59 and a half, you can access your personal contribution accounts. There's some things to be aware of there. If we have your rollover, if you rolled your money in, at any time you can take a distribution from your rollover account, but then we're going to talk about age 59 and a half and the significance of that. And with in-service withdrawals, well, if you're over age 59 and a half, there's some considerations there as well, and we'll get into that. And there's other things, do disability, qualified military service, call our customer solutions area to see if any of that may apply to you. With these hardship loans, basically you're taking a loan out of your account. We are applying an interest rate, okay, and our interest rate is prime rate plus 2%. You've taken it out of the investment, so it's not growing in the investments. The interest rate on top of the loan, you're repaying the loan to yourself with a little bit of interest that kind of rebuilds, that interest that you lost by taking out the account. It's a maximum of $50,000 is what you can take from the loan. We have a minimum of $1,000 to take a loan. And we really have two time frames, or two different types of loans. The first is just simply if you are using the loan for the purchase of a primary residence. So you'd have to provide the documentation to us. That loan can go out as much as 15 years. It doesn't have to go the whole 15 years, but you can have that loan amortized for 15 years if you choose. Any other purpose for which you want to take a loan, there's a maximum of 5 years. So there's a 5 years for any general purpose loans. Again, it doesn't have to be the full 5 years, but you have that duration of time to pay it back to yourself. And the way our loan program works, which is somewhat unique, is we're not going through payroll deduction of your loan repayment through payroll to make that loan repayment. You're giving us your banking information, and we're doing a direct debit on a monthly basis from your bank account to pay off that loan. And you'll hear how that's advantageous later on in another context. If you take out a loan and for whatever reason you cannot repay the loan and it goes into default, it becomes a distribution, a qualified distribution. It is taxable. It's ordinary income. If you're under age 59 and a half, there's a 10% tax penalty. On top of your ordinary income tax rate, there's an additional 10% tax penalty. We will send you a 1099-R to help you with your taxes. And availability of future loans may be limited. Oftentimes, loans are limited for someone who has taken a loan default or experienced a loan default. Then we also have hardship withdrawals, again, from your personal contribution accounts. If you have a rollover account, we'll steer you to take money out of the rollover account first because there's no tax penalty. It's just ordinary income. We'll work with you through customer service with that. There's reasons that you can take a hardship withdrawal. So there's 11 or 12 criteria that one of those things you have to have is a qualified reason to take this hardship withdrawal. And we'll work with you with that. And if you need to take a withdrawal of, let's say, $10,000, but there's going to be all these tax consequences, and you really need the $10,000 to satisfy it, we'll work with you to figure out how much to take overall, and then the net of those taxes would result in your $10,000 check. So we're kind of rolling it up to make sure you even off what you're looking for later on, and we'll work with you with that as well. Some of the reasons to qualify for a hardship withdrawal: unreimbursed medical expenses, funeral expenses, tuition or educational fees for post-secondary education, buying a principal residence or not getting foreclosed or evicted from your residence, repairs that may be done, certainly due to a storm. If it's a FEMA declared disaster, then yes, you can get this distribution. This is not the comprehensive list. So if you think you need to take a hardship withdrawal, again, call our customer solutions area. There are tax considerations, okay? You're under age 59 and a half. It's taxable. It's going to come out as ordinary income taxes, and then is a 10% tax penalty that applies. Again, you're under age 59 and a half. And we'll work with you to figure out what the tax consequence is, as I mentioned earlier, to get the amount that's netted out of the distribution to be what you need to satisfy your hardship. If you have a rollover account, again, we'll steer you to that before a hardship withdrawal. It's available upon request. You can get at that anytime, that particular rollover account. just right through benefit access, you identify that's where you want it to come from, you'll get that money wired into your account just within a couple of days. The 59.5 rule applies here as well. If you're under it, it's an additional 10% tax penalty. If you're over age 59.5, there is no penalty. It's just all ordinary income. And if you're over that magic age of 59.5, it recalculates itself or qualifies itself as an in-service withdrawal. No 10% tax penalty, again, still from your personal investment plan accounts. There are qualified military withdrawals. Again, there was a disability withdrawal I spoke to earlier. If you have any questions as to whether or not under these circumstances, these conditions, you qualify for withdrawal, call our customer service area, work with them, and they'll give you the guidance that you need. So that's in-service account access. You have separation from service now. If you're a clergy person, well, separation is really terminating conference membership. If you're a lay employee, you've terminated, you leave the plan sponsor employment, you can leave your accounts with us. You're happy with the performance, you like life stage investment management or future life stage retirement income, what have you, you can. But you can also roll it over to another, your new employer or what have you. If you actually stay within one plan sponsor to another plan sponsor, but underneath the umbrella of the UMC, maybe Florida Annual Conference, and you're going to continue to stay in UMPIP, those accounts will go along with you. And then in retirement, yeah, we like to give choices. We like to give options to individuals. And this is your account. You can take a full lump sum of the account. Again, you want to work with an advisor and understand, what that's all about, what you're going to do with it. But that full lump sum can be a rollover out to another investment vehicle, qualified retirement plan. You can do a partial lump sum. Very often for people going into retirement to take some of that account balance, just help transition into the new world. Maybe you're moving, extending the house a little bit, what have you. But then primarily, it's the cash installments. This is to provide retirement income to you in retirement. There's two ways you can go about that. You can self-manage your retirement income. You tell us how much you want to receive on a monthly basis. $800, for example. We'll provide that to you. And then whenever you need to change it, you just let us know and we'll change that amount for you. It's very simple to do. Or you can use life stage retirement income. The life stage retirement income, what you're doing is you're asking us to derive the amount of monthly installment payments for you. And we do it in a very complicated algorithmic kind of way. We're going into retirement. We calculate an amount to give you, but each November of each year, we recalculate the amount, looking at your market balance and all of that, with the intention and the practice of giving increases over time to help us keep pace with purchasing power. So that dynamic is built into that program. A little out of scope to go into great detail in that program now, but you can certainly reach out to us and get more information on that as needed. You can leave it on account until required minimum distribution age has been attained, and there's plan loans in retirement. As I said, we're not taking deductions from payroll. We're doing a direct debit from your account. So in retirement, and it's very uncommon, in retirement, you can still take a loan out of your UMPIP, pay it back to yourself, because we're just going to use the banking information that you have provided. In relation to this required minimum distribution, it's kind of environment where you go into retirement, maybe you don't need to tap into your UMPIP account balances. Maybe it's a part of an estate plan. That's part of how you want your inheritance to flow through to children or whomever. Well, the IRS steps in at a certain age and says, okay, you've tax deferred long enough. You need to start paying taxes now on some of these accounts. Now, please note, if you have a qualified Roth contribution account, the RMD doesn't apply because there's no tax consideration if it's a qualified Roth account. So this is your before tax, and if you have some after tax in there, you have to start, and rollover, you have to start taking some distributions. The laws have changed over the last several years. So right now, for a person who was born before 1959, the required minimum distribution age is the attainment of age 73. Anybody born 1959 and later, the attained age is age 75. We work with you throughout. You'll get, if you haven't started taking distributions and you're flagged as someone to take an RMD, I'd say 6 months before that happens, we're going to start to inundate you with materials to make sure you begin to take your RMD. Calculation is a table that the IRS has, again, but depending upon your age, But the base is what was the market value of your account as of 12/31 of a given year. So 12/31, 2024, we have a market value. Somebody who has to take a required minimum distribution, that table, that factoring gets applied, and we now know what their required minimum distribution will be. And then lastly, we'll talk about our participant resources, and we have a plethora of resources available to you. The ability for me to do this right now, we do webinars, we do seminars, you can hear about one-on-one benefit education consultations, but we've got EY financial planning services, we have our customer solutions area, and we have our benefit access web platform. If you have not registered for this, please register for this. Very easy, just a couple of screens, just have your cell phone nearby, because we will authenticate who you are just to make sure the security protocols are handled. But once you get onto benefit access, you can see your current account information. You can see your transaction history. You can see how your accounts are being invested. We have projection tools that are available to you to see what your accounts may look like in the future. Beneficiary designations, very important to make sure they are in good working order. Something tragic happens to you and your spouse, and they're not in good working order, it'll go to your state, Florida courts, takes years, costs money to come out. And you can see here on this illustration on the right-hand side, but in certain screens up on top, we have a lot of educational resources for you to use. So if you're on a screen and you're looking at something like Life Stage Investment Management, there'll be information there on the right-hand side for you to learn more about how the program works. So kind of redundant here, benefitaccess.org. You can get at it from westpath.org or directly to benefitsaccess.org. Again, your account balances, transaction details, investment performance. And now we're back to talking about EY Financial Planning Services. As I said, they provide comprehensive, holistic household financial planning services to all of us. It's confidential. And they are very professional. They will not try to sell you anything. They're going to want to see everything you have to do a comprehensive financial plan. But if they're looking at like your life insurance policy, they're not going to say, hey, I have one better, and try to sell you on any of that. They will not do that. There is no additional out-of-pocket expense to you. The operating expenses of the investment funds pays for this, part of the overhead that they pay for. There's no limit on the amount of calls you make in a year or the amount of hours you work with them in a given year. You can use them as often as you can. Really, your investment is just the front end time that you need to get everything kind of sorted out with them. They have a lot of educational tools as well. If you're not sure how you are from that risk tolerance perspective, there's some tools you can use there to kind of give you a better feeling for how you are in your relationship with the investment markets, if you will. There's their phone number. They're available to call during 8 to 7 p.m. Central Time during the week. We often talk about them in the context I just did. Financial planning, retirement income planning, tax efficiency planning. But it's not just the big picture stuff. If during the course of the year, something comes up, you're trying to figure out, should I lease a car? Should I buy a car? How do I fund a child or grandchild's education? How do I manage my debt? There's good debt, household debt, your house, bad debt, excessive credit card debt. They can work with you in all of those details, as well as setting up a relationship with them that you check in periodically on your overall financial plan. And then we in Benefit Education do what we call one-on-one benefit education consultations. There's a registration link that gets provided. You click on that, you set up on your time, your schedule, you set up a 1/2 hour consultation. It'll get assigned to myself. That's Todd Creviston here, who actually joined me in person when we went to Village School. And we have 2 other benefit educators that also will do this one-on-one consultation. We set up an MS Teams video conference. We share our screen, we run reports, we show you your benefit access record. If we don't get through everything in the 1/2 hour, we just go ahead and schedule the next 1/2 hour and so on. It's not one and done. We'll continue to do this until everything has really come to its conclusion. We really love doing this. We started doing this in earnest with the pandemic, and it continues on. And really what we have found over time is participants will do one-on-one benefit educations as they're preparing themselves to get started with EY Financial Planning Services. So that's a consideration as well. With action planning, if you're not in UMPIP, enroll in UMPIP. If you haven't really taken a look at what you're doing in UMPIP, take some time. Look at the contribution account that you're in, talk to EY. about whether or not you might want to switch from one to the other. How much can you put in there? How can you kind of scale yourself over time to contribute more and more? How are you using the WestPath funds from an investment strategy perspective? Life Stage Investment Management is a great program, but are you self-managing? You can do that as well. Just make sure that you yourself are going in, looking at it periodically, and probably rebalancing as you want it to continue to be at your point in time. We have benefitaccess.org. Take advantage of that. Register if you haven't. Call EY. Get started with, again, no out-of-pocket cost to you, and some real legitimate financial planning services. Schedule a one-on-one benefit education consultation. So that concludes this webinar. I hope you have found it informative. Have a wonderful